All right, the other firing this one blew my mind. I saw it come down the pipe, and I was like, what in the world are the Tennessee Titans doing? They fired their GM, Ran Carthon, after 2 seasons. So they went from John Robinson, who got fired December 2023, fired Mike Vrabel, or it was December 2022, excuse me, Mike Vrabel after the next season, and now Ran Carthon after the next season.
But kept the head coach.
Making no sense to me. He has drafted really well in the offensive line, right? I mean, you're the draft guy.
They had a pretty good draft last year.
Yeah. I thought the draft was great. I mean,
they've got like 3 guys in his regime that have been players on the offensive line. Like that's important. I don't know. What do you think? I was kind of surprised by this. If you're going to do the GM, you got to do everybody.
Yeah, that's the thing that's crazy to me, is that you're letting a guy who could very well be a lame duck head coach. I mean, you end up with the number 1 overall pick in your first season for a team that I think fairly objectively shouldn't be drafting number 1 overall.
Great defense.
They have talent on that roster in a way that other teams around the NFL that are ending up with better records than them did not. So shouldn't have been drafting number 1 overall. Thought Callahan did objectively not a great job in his first year. And so you're going in with now going to be a new GM with possibly a lame duck head coach
with then a new 1 pick.
Yeah, it's bad.
So let me break this down because I know Ran Carthon personally. I was with him in San Fran. Love Ran. Finally got his opportunity. He was excited. I was probably one of the first people to text him and said how proud of him I was. Talked to him at the Senior Bowl after he got the job. When you look at it, right, a lot of people thought Tennessee was maybe a quarterback away. Could Will Levis be the guy or not? I will say this, right, and I would say this to Ran in his face. I thought he got, and I love a GM that's aggressive, but I thought he got too aggressive in some of the moves he made in free agency. Ones that come to mind, the Calvin Ridley thing. Ridley was coming off of 2 years not playing, and he had a okay year in Jacksonville. I mean, again, you got to put this into perspective. Going over 1,000 yards in the 17-game season isn't what it used to be, right? And he had a lot of drops. He had a whole bunch of concentration drops, which bled into this season as well for the Tennessee Titans. Again, a whole lot of drops as well. There were question marks about him learning the playbook in Jacksonville, being on the same page with Trevor Lawrence. And you saw that at times this year with Will Levis as well. And then another big one from your Chiefs. I know you're Chicago Bears, but
Snead.
Yeah, L'Jarius Sneed, right? The Chiefs were willing to let him go because there were rumors that he had something wrong with his knee. Now, again, played at a Pro Bowl level last year and was a straight dog. But they traded not only draft capital, but money as well to get him in. And what did he play, like 6 games, if that? So that didn't work as well either. Now, again, as a GM, not everything is going to be a home run hit, right? But to your guys' point, for you to change the GM in 2 years is utterly ridiculous. Like, if you're going to do that, clean the whole house.
Yeah.
Right? Because to Mike's point, to Kyle's point, there was enough talent on that roster to at bare minimum win 7 games this year. Right? And when you look at it, they could have even potentially competed for the division with the Houston Texans, because we know the AFC South is a lame duck division, but Jacksonville had a down year. A lot of people thought that they would take a step, and they didn't as well. Indianapolis was coming off 9 wins the year before, so a lot of people were like, they'll probably muddle around that again, and they did this year. So it's like that. Essentially, that division was up for grabs.
Yes.
And again, the pieces they have on defense, I mean, they have dogs on defense.
Sweat and Simmons are 2 of the scariest.
And then you throw Arden Key in there too, and Harold Landry on the other side. Like, they have dogs on that team.
I'm just worried about those bigs on the other side.
Yeah, for sure. They have, but that's the thing. When them dogs are pushing in the middle, that means it makes it a lot easier for the guys to come around the corner. So, yes, Ran Carthon had some misses, right? But when you're trying to change the culture and turn things over, because in Tennessee it hasn't been good for the last few years. Now, Mike Vrabel did have them in the playoffs consistently, but his last couple of years, they weren't
6
as good.
24 or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. They have not been good the last couple of years. And when you're trying to overturn that, it's going to take a little bit of time. To Mike's point, all right, you want to move on from the GM? You got to move on from the head coach as well, too, because they gave him talent on that roster. And for you to have the number 1 pick, there's no excuse for that.
Yeah, I do think this, if there's anything to point to that could be why it happened, they gave a record amount of money, guaranteed money in free agency last year to that class, whether it was Lloyd Cushenberry, whether it was Calvin Ridley, whether it was Jerry Sneed, I guess not technically free agent, but like an offseason acquisition.
Him,
and the returns were a number 1 overall pick, right? Yeah. Like if that's, and that's an owner when you give out guaranteed money, they're putting that out.
They're feeling it in their pocket.
Right? They're feeling it immediately. So that will make an owner butthurt real quickly.
But it goes back to what we talked about. Like, you can't make decisions on emotion.
Yeah.
Right now, again, if he had come in there, and yes, they've struggled the last few years, but they also had a coaching change. So you got to give at least a GM and head coach. You should at minimum give them 3 years, but at least 2. For them not to give them 2 years, it's ridiculous. And now it's like you said, when you hire a new GM, Callahan's not his guy. What makes you think they're going to see?
There's no trust.
What makes you think they're going to be eye to eye and see things? You could be in this same scenario again last year. So it goes back to what Mike was saying. Like, most of the decisions are made by owners and GMs all the time. To me, this was an emotional decision that shouldn't have been made.
I agree.
People in Tennessee aren't happy.
To that point, let's go up top just a few hours north flight-wise to the New York Giants. And this would be my deep dive later. But it's just like, we publicly saw what Joe Shane was saying in the offseason, right, in regards to not bringing in Saquon Barkley, or the Xavier McKinney thing made absolutely no sense to me, because I hate when players get tagged, right? Us as players, we hate that.
Yeah.
But they had that at their disposal and didn't use it. They couldn't even use a transition tag, right? Now, maybe somebody would have paid him because he ended up being one of the top play safeties on the league anyway by Green Bay. But it's just like the fact that you didn't think a 24-year-old that was getting ready to be on his second-year deal, that for most of this season led the league in interceptions, wasn't going to be a foundational piece for you.
You're just not watching.
And it was the way he was talking, like the pride he had in his voice about letting Saquon go, letting Xavier McKinney. And yet this guy still has his job. But yet Ran Carthon in 2 years gets fired. Like, it's utterly ridiculous.
And then there's the other side, people keeping their jobs with, gross negligence as to what their job requires. I look around the league and, you're talking about Callahan. If Carthon's going to go, Callahan's got to go. And, my buddy Ryan Poles in Chicago, there's been questions about him the entire offseason. And there's questions about people in all buildings. But some teams are quick to react and make these emotional decisions, and some teams sit on their hands for too long and miss the boat on potential Super Bowl winning staffs. It's a shame, but that's this league, man.
I just think
I wanted to ask him real quick, what do you think about the president's comments about Ryan Poles in regards to people saying, he's on the last year of his deal?
You're talking about George McCaskey.
Correct.
Not Joe Biden.
So George is one of the classiest individuals ever. He flies coach. If he gets an exit row, he gets an exit row, but he's sitting in the back of the plane. Make sure that everybody on his staff has a first-class experience. He's a tremendous family man, a churchgoer. You would love George McCaskey. Okay. He umpires Little League games.
I love that.
He is the best. And he'll talk to you like nothing, like just a normal guy. Because he is a normal guy. He just happens to, his family owns the Bears. But here's the deal. He never played. He never played the game. And he's never had his hand in the dirt. And he's never been in the front of the team meeting room after a tough loss and had to address a group of men. So I find it hard to believe that he is as prepared as we would hope as Bears fans in terms of making football decisions, which is why you hope that a guy like Kevin Warren or Ryan Poles or Ian Yates Cunningham would be able to make these decisions. And while they have gotten a lot of things right, there have been some things that they've completely.
Yeah, actually, I think it was Kevin Warren that said something about Poles a year is a lifetime or something like. I don't know. Did you see those comments?
It feels like people are learning on the job.
Yeah.
And he was talking about his Poles going to be back next year.
That's what I'm saying,
a year is a lifetime. But it seems
what
like
type of comment is that?
I don't know. I'm not a president. I'm not an owner. I'm not a GM. But it's clear to me that there are not enough real football people in buildings across the league, and people that are not just yes men. There's so many people that are tied on to thinking about what their next gig is if this thing gets canned, and
it's unfortunate reality.
Who am I going to take with me, and who wronged me? It's like Tom and Antonio. It's like that shit keeps up. If you think it's just players, you're wrong. It's guys in these buildings as well. But I do want to make sure that I get the point across that I love George McCaskey, but there's limits to what we can do. I was an offensive lineman. You can't count on me to tell you what the coverage was every play. You know what I'm saying? That's why they make quarterbacks, and that's why they make receivers doing check with me. But I don't know if he knows what he wants or what it takes. And when I hear the question about the GM and the head coach being in unison, some of the answers scare me.
Well, you want your GM and head coach in unison. That's why
yes.
putting them on different
only that easy, right?
different contract schedules just
doesn't make sense.
Never makes sense. Never makes sense.
Because then you get a GM that's overdrafting to save his
well, then
skin.
You get power struggles.
Yeah,
you get power struggles.
Sure. But then there's that part too where you said they're off schedule. It's like the new head coach, same GM. GM's going to try to make managerial decisions to save his job. Head coach is trying to have a good introduction to his career. Sometimes the wires get crossed and you get a shit product, and it's unfortunate that we have to watch that.
100%.